Here we go. Catching speckled trout in deep water can be challenging, and a great fishing rig to help you meet that challenge is the heavy drop shot. In fact, I'd go to say that it's the best fishing tackle you can use to catch speckled trout when they go deep. But why this particular rig? What makes it so great? In this guide, you will learn the answers to those questions, as well as the best way to tie the heavy drop shot and, just as important, good tips to fishing it the best way possible. To get started, we'll identify exactly what a heavy drop shot is. The heavy drop shot is a rig that's used to fish the bottom of deep water. It is somewhat based on the standard drop shot, which consists of light line, a small hook, and specialized weight. The standard drop shot is actually not a bad rig to use for finicky speckled trout, but I would not fish it for general purpose use in the realm of inshore fishing in Louisiana. Instead, I would use the heavy drop shot, which possesses all the great qualities of the standard version, but is modified with thicker line, a stronger hook, cheap sinkers, and a swivel. This way it can withstand the punishment of day-to-day use on Louisiana's coast and bigger inshore species like redfish and sheepshead, and incidental trash fish like sailcats. So now that we are clear on what a heavy drop shot is, let's look at the parts you need to tie one and then how to tie it. The parts you need to tie a heavy drop shot: a size 4 swivel, 3 feet of 20-pound monofilament leader line, a 3/0 octopus hook, and assorted bank sinkers. Quick note on where to buy. All the tackle listed you can find at your local tackle store, or you can support my business by using the links below, for which I get a small affiliate commission at no extra cost to you. Thank you for your support.
And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
A size 4 swivel. Your standard drop shot doesn't feature a swivel to attach the drop shot to your main line, but for the heavy drop shot we are using a swivel, and I'll explain why. A swivel is important because it makes rigging up easy in the first place, and not just tying this rig, but tying it to your main line on the day of your fishing trip. It is unnecessarily more difficult to tie line-to-line knots out on the water, especially when it's windy and the waves are rocking the boat. That the drop shot rig can spin a bunch, putting twist in your line. But if you use a swivel, this twist will be mostly eliminated. So that's why we use a swivel in a heavy drop shot. Your standard drop shot doesn't feature this. But with that said, sometimes I fish without a swivel, and that's because I enjoy a slicker rig, make a habit of regularly removing twist from my spinning rods, and, if needed, I'm comfortable tying a uni-to-uni knot out on the water. However, I still have extra heavy drop shot rigs with swivels ready to be tied on in the event that I get on a hot bite somewhere there's a lot of snags and I might lose 1 or 2 rigs. Moving on, 20-pound monofilament leader line. Here we are using monofilament, 20-pound monofilament, as a leader line because it's cheap and it stands up to abuse. Conventional drop shots use a fluorocarbon, and that's because they are typically being used somewhere the water is clear and the fish are pressured, like when pro anglers, and this is just a good example, like when professional bass anglers are fishing for smallmouth in the clear water of northern destinations. But that is not the case for speckled trout in Louisiana. So you can use fluorocarbon for a heavy drop shot if you think it is needed, but for the sake of this guide, it is not. With that said, you should definitely not use braid for a leader line. It will tangle more because it is flimsy and thin, not to mention that it's not as clear as monofilament and certainly sticks out like a sore thumb. If you use braid as a leader line, you will be wasting time untangling it rather than reeling in fish. 3/0 octopus hook. Next up is this particular hook, but what matters is not getting this exact hook, but getting one with its qualities. First off, this hook has a flat eye. The eyes on most hooks are oriented vertically, and this will not do on a heavy drop shot. That's because of the way you tie a drop shot, which we will get to shortly. If the hook has a vertical eye, then it will orient sideways on the line. But if the hook is oriented horizontally, then it will rig straight up and down, resulting in a better presentation of the bait and good hook sets. Next, you want a hook that is stronger. This is why we are using an aught-sized hook, in this case 3/0, over a number-sized hook like what we see on standard drop shots. Assorted bank sinkers. Last but not least, you will want to have some bank sinkers handy. An assortment of half-ounce and 1-ounce bank sinkers is plenty. However, having a few 2-ounce sinkers couldn't hurt for the rare occasion you are fishing for speckled trout somewhere that is deep with swift-moving current. Now, the reason we are using these sinkers is because they are cheap and they're easy to swap out onto heavy drop shot. There are specialized tungsten drop shot weights out there that feature a built-in swivel and line clip to bail you out of the occasional snag, but these tend to be more expensive and are not as widely available. You really don't want to fish with these because you will inevitably be fishing around places with lots of snags, such as cypress stumps, oyster reefs, oil rigs, bridge pilings, and more. Losing tackle at these fishing hotspots will eventually happen. There's just no getting around it. So you can lose specialty sinkers that cost $4 and need to be shipped to you, or you can lose mass-produced bank sinkers that cost 30 cents at your local tackle store. It's your call. Luckily for you and me, here on the Gulf Coast, bank sinkers practically grow on trees. Now, they don't have the neato line clip like the specialty sinkers, but if you keep watching, I'll show you a handy-dandy trick to save your rig in case a bank sinker gets snagged. For now, we have detailed our list of tackle. Now let me show you how I prefer to tie it. How to tie the heavy drop shot. We begin with cutting a 3-foot length of 20-pound monofilament leader line. It doesn't need to be exact, just more or less that length. Then tie your hook to it using a Palomar knot. You want the pigtails to be about the same length. Next, you want to pull one of the pigtails through the hook eye. It doesn't matter which one, just grab an end, thread it through the eye of the hook, and pull it tight. This will make the hook stand straight out. It even protects the knot to a degree. Either way, you can clearly see how much cleaner this rigs than if you left the knot outside of the hook's eye. Your next step will be to tie a loop knot to the bottom of the rig. Then attach whatever weight bank sinker you require by running the loop knot through the eye, around the sinker, then pulling tight. Finally, we tie that size 4 swivel to the top of the rig with an improved clinch knot. And now it's ready to be attached to the braided mainline of your favorite spinning rod with another improved clinch knot, or it's ready to be stored away for future use. Of course, practicing tying the heavy drop shot will make you better at it over time, so don't sweat it if your first time wasn't picturesque. Remember, practice makes perfect. Now let me give you some confidence with the heavy drop shot. So this could be a new rig for you, and a recurring problem, like a recurring thing, that I've seen with new rigs for inshore anglers, even those rigs that have stood the test of time, is a lack of confidence fishing with them. Confidence is everything. So stay with me as I explain why this rig is so good, which is a lot easier to do now that you've seen how it's tied and have something to look at. Use lures or bait, whatever works for you. The heavy drop shot works well with live bait, whether that's Kakaho minnows, pogies, or Louisiana's favorite, live shrimp. But it also works well with a variety of soft plastics. This is great because it accommodates the fishing preferences of you and your friends. Nobody is left out with a heavy drop shot. Now, 2 quick notes. First off, keep watching and I'll show you a good soft plastic that has worked well for me. Second, when fishing live shrimp with a heavy drop shot, you will want to hook it through the tail so that it doesn't spin in the current. Moving on, no extra fishing rod required. Furthermore, you don't need casting tackle to fish a heavy drop shot. I say this because I feel that most deep water, despite everything I have set up until this point in time, I feel that most deep water is actually fished best with a jig, which in my humble opinion is best used on casting tackle. If you've seen the videos on my other channel, then you know that I am almost always throwing a jig, and when I do, I'm throwing it with a bait caster and casting rod. The problem with casting tackle is that it requires a whole new skill set to use and more tackle to buy if you don't already have it. The heavy drop shot solves this problem because it is best fished on spinning tackle, which is what most inshore anglers already use and are familiar with. It fishes the bottom with authority. The heavy drop shot also gets to the bottom with authority. As you may have seen in my video about how to fish deep holes for speckled trout, fishing deep water can be challenging. And this is important because if you've seen my other video about how to fish deep holes, how to fish deep water for speckled trout, then you already know all the challenges associated with fishing deep. The heavy drop shot is a great solution to meet those challenges. All it requires is a big heavy weight secured on the loop knot. Easily swap out sinkers. Next, it's very easy to change out sinkers on this rig, which is important if you need more or less sinking weight to dial in a good presentation on speckled trout, or redfish, sheepshead, or whatever you're targeting. On a Carolina rig, you are stuck with cutting the line, swapping the sinker, and having to retie. Same thing for a jig. But for a heavy drop shot, you have that loop knot to swiftly change out bank sinkers. Easy day. Less tangling and better presentations. Another advantage to the heavy drop shot is that during the cast, it is being led from the bottom by the sinker. This keeps it from tangling, unlike a Carolina rig. That and the heavy drop shot keeps the line tight while the sinker sits on the bottom, keeping the bait just above the bottom and making it a lot easier to feel the bite. It's far more sensitive than anything with a loose leader, such as a Carolina rig or dropper loop. Heavy drop shot lanyap. Now that you know why the heavy drop shot is so awesome for catching speckled trout, let's look at some tips and tricks to get the most out of it. Fish the right rod and reel combo. You will get the most out of the heavy drop shot when you match it with the ideal fishing rod, reel, and line. To get started, you want to use a medium heavy or heavy power, fast or regular action spinning rod that is 7 feet long. And then pair it with a 3000 size spinning reel spooled in 20-pound braid. Now, when selecting a color for your braided main line, get something that's bright. You want something that's bright so you can easily see the fishing line where it intersects the water's surface. This way, it is much easier to detect visual indicators of a bite that you may not feel as easily. That and bright fishing line sure does make life easier when handling it, especially if your eyesight isn't perfect. And no, you won't have to worry about fish seeing it because you'll be using a leader line that isn't bright. And just as an added note here, if your fishing rod is like a few inches longer or shorter, that's fine. If your reel is a little bit smaller or bigger, like a 2500 or 3500, that's okay too. Small variations are okay. I just wouldn't use like a medium light rod or a 6000 size reel, not for inshore fishing with a heavy drop shot. Securing the heavy drop shot. The one clunky thing about the heavy drop shot is that it does not secure on a rod as cleanly as like a Carolina rig does. And that's because once you secure the hook on it, you're left with that sinker just swinging around. This can lead to annoying tangles and could unnecessarily beat up your boat and tackle. While I have seen a few aftermarket inventions that solve this problem, you will find that using a rubber band or your girlfriend's hair tie works just as well. Simple to store. As you have seen, this rig is easy to tie, so it can be tempting to think that you'll just tie one up on the day of your fishing trip. Perish the thought. This is not the best way to prepare for success. Yes, it is best to have your tackle already squared away before you launch the boat. But as an added measure, it's also a good idea to tie a bunch of heavy drop shots in advance. I like to organize them into quart-size Ziploc bags so they don't tangle. They stay dry and are easy to retrieve when needed. If you do this, then you'll always have heavy drop shot rigs available. Your life will be a lot easier and your fishing trips a lot more enjoyable. How to make your heavy drop shot semi-snagless. Look, there's no such thing as a snagless lure or rig. There's always something lurking underwater that's snaggy enough to snag it away forever. But there is a way to modify the heavy drop shot to jettison the sinker should it become snagged on something. The trick here is to use a small rubber band to attach the bank sinker to the loop knot. It will be strong enough to stay attached to the leader line, but should the weight become snagged on something, it is weak enough to give way and save the rest of the rig. Then all you need to do is put on another weight. This is much more ethical than leaving an entire rig on the bottom, not to mention that it saves you the hassle of wearing out your main line and having to retie. My favorite solution for this is the 100 pack of orthodontic bands. It's cheap and effective. Of course, if the hook gets snagged, you are pretty much done and just need to pop the line and retie. Bummer, dude. Soft plastic lures to use for the heavy drop shot. Last, but not least, you can use a variety of soft plastics to nose hook onto a heavy drop shot. These include, but are not limited to, matrix shad, DOA shrimp, zoom fluke, gulp shrimp, and even the timeless sparkle beetle. You want to hook these through the nose on a heavy drop shot. As inshore anglers, we are accustomed to threading soft plastics onto the hook, like what we do with a jig head. But not on a drop shot. We nose hook the lure to give it a little more action and put the tip of the hook where fish strike, the head. Consider that when fish eat something, they almost always eat it head first so it slides down their throat nice and easy. Which soft plastic is best for the heavy drop shot? I recommend getting a large bag of 3-inch chartreuse sparkle beetles. For one, they're durable, and two, they're cheap. And of course, they just work. You see all these fish here? Yeah, they were caught on a sparkle beetle. You really don't need a super realistic lure with lots of action or wiggle. The limits of speckled trout and redfish you want to catch just aren't that picky. Well, not usually. Look, the key to successful fishing is to find biting fish in the first place. It doesn't matter if you use live bait or the hottest new color or just whatever the latest fad is, if you're not casting at where fish are to begin with. If you can find biting fish, then it really won't matter what you throw so long as you get it in front of them and there's a hook on it. It really is that easy. To learn how to do that, I suggest watching this video next.